But a deep transformation takes place when they're in the room, when you got them, when you got their attention. If you don't do that, forget it, you're getting a suntan. Everything I'm going to talk about in these next 2 days is the model that I use to get into an extraordinary place that I'll be talking to you about, and the tools I'm going to share with you tomorrow are the tools that I use to get there. I'm going to show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Even though we're going fast, because there's a magic that's going to take place in here, and whether you're aware of it or not, you're going to get it, and the transformation is going to take place. I know how to take you on this journey to the infinite and create this transformation, even if it doesn't make sense to you.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Ironically, this is not far from the truth. Do you believe in fate, Neil?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there. Like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
Love starting out with some drama. However, many of you have no idea how accurate that actually is for what we're going to be going through the next couple of days. So welcome. Few introductory remarks. You're here for the same reason as Neo that you just saw in that clip. You know something too. You feel it. You sense there's something wrong with what's going on and what you've been taught and supposedly how everything works. You want to know the truth, and that's why you came here. Maybe you knew that consciously, maybe you didn't, but that's the truth of why you're here. The good news or the bad news, depending on how you look at it, is you've already taken the red pill. I didn't give you a choice. So I guess unless you want to leave now, that red pill's in you, and boom. I'm going to show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. By the way, I'll talk about this in a minute, but if I was a musician and this whole thing is a song, this is like my guitar. So you're going to see that I use this a lot in order to create the song that is going to be this experience, which is another reason why you want to make sure you can see everything here well. We're going to start out with philosophy. Then we're going to move into the science that validates it, because some people need that. Some people can absorb a philosophy and that's fine. Other people, that's too airy-fairy, warm and fuzzy out there for them, and they need some meat on the bones to be able to accept it. So we're going to go into the science that validates it. Then we're going to move into the practical how-to, most of which is going to be tomorrow. We have to do all three for you to be able to journey to the infinite. A lot of people are anxious for, I want the how-to, I want to know how do I do it, what do I do, the practical steps. We're going to get there, we're going to spend a lot of time there. But without these two, you wouldn't really be empowered to get where you want to go. So this is the flow of how we're going to move over the next 2 days. I'm going to be using stories, metaphors, video clips, images, and experiences to help lock this in for you all, which again is the guitar aspect of this, to help you integrate everything and have powerful reference points when you leave. Raise your hand if you did not see the multimedia invitation for this event on the internet. Okay, I'm 51. I started in the self-help industry, just to call it that, when I was 16. And I have been a participant, a facilitator of other people's work, and a facilitator of my own work for 30 plus years. And the interesting thing is, there's actually a term for what happens in most events that you go to. And it's called the suntan effect. And what it means is, you go to an event, you feel very powerful, you feel like you can take on the world, and you can do anything, which is the equivalent of getting a tan. And then you go back to your life, and what happens? Now, there are stories of permanent transformation that takes place, but in general, it's suntans. You're going to find out today and tomorrow why that was actually by design, and it was brilliant that it was working that way, but that's what happens. And when I first was working with Tony Robbins like 18 years ago or something, I tried to take on that sucker and beat it. Because if I was promising transformation, I wanted to deliver transformation. And it wasn't happening for most of the people. And I tried everything I could think of. Doing different things, integration workshops afterwards, follow-up materials, special bonus everything. But it kept happening. And then finally I figured out on my journey that the only way that you can avoid that, if you're using live events, but the same thing is true if you're doing video kinds of things remotely, which I like to do, is if when you got them, you create a profound and deep transformation on the spot, so they don't have to go home and do something to create a deep transformation. It takes place. They may have stuff they got to do when they go home, but a deep transformation takes place when they're in the room, when you got them, when you got their attention. If you don't do that, forget it. You're getting a suntan. And I figured out how to do that, which is part of the experience that we're going to be going through today. And this is going to be very different for that reason in a lot of ways. I normally do this event, not this event, but this event about this topic, this material over 4 days. Sometimes I've done it with 3 days. So we're condensing it into 2 days, which I've never done before. So we're going to have to move really fast on some stuff. But you are going to get it, even though we're going fast, because if there's a magic that's going to take place in here, and whether you're aware of it or not, you're going to get it. And the transformation is going to take place. But I'm going to have to go pretty fast because there's a lot that I want to cover with you. I will make it very easy for you in a lot of ways to review everything that you get here, so you don't need to worry about that. Look at the entire experience like this. Imagine somebody gave you a jigsaw puzzle, didn't show you the box, dumped all the pieces on a table and said, "Go get them, Tiger." And you don't know what the picture is. So you start assembling pieces, and in the beginning you don't know what it is. You're just assembling pieces and the edges are starting to whatever, but you don't know what the picture is going to look like. And then you assemble enough pieces and you can kind of say, well, this is a nature scene, but you still don't know what it is. And you keep assembling pieces until at some point the whole picture pops out and you can see it clearly. That's what's going to happen here. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of puzzle pieces. And some of you have some familiarity with my work anyway, and you're going to have a big picture much earlier to start, and it'll expand a little bit if that's been your path. But just look at it as puzzle pieces, puzzle pieces, puzzle pieces, and trust that at some point the big picture is going to get really clear for you, because it will. At certain points it may not. You may wonder, where's he going with this? Where's this going to tie up? Whatever. But look at it as puzzle pieces and know that you will see the big picture. All right, I got to warn you. And again, there's a mixed audience here. There are some people that are completely new to my work, and there are people that are familiar. So if you're already somewhat familiar, you're not going to have as much of an issue with this, but the experience is going to deepen. And if you're new, this is really going to seriously mess with your head. So be prepared. All of your life, you were taught that the opposite of what I'm going to tell you here, pretty much, unless you had an unusual background, was true. So do not be surprised. You may think at times, is he crazy? If you're new to this. If you're not new to this, you wouldn't be here. If you thought some of this stuff, but you might. He can't be serious. This is not what I expected or wanted when I signed up for this. No way. Or my personal favorite, bullshit. That's all to be expected if you're new to this. Here's why, if it's the slide I think it is. No, not yet. You may feel at times, even if you are already familiar with some of my work, you may feel at times over the next couple of days overwhelmed, disoriented, skeptical, angry, uncomfortable, or fried. That's necessary to get you where I want to go and where you want to go, or you wouldn't be here. I love playing with technology, which you're going to see. You've got to be seriously shaken up if you want a journey to the infinite, because we have all been fed a line of shit that is not true, and which has limited and restricted us far beyond any way you may be consciously aware of, and we've got to blast that out. So to do that, we got to get pretty dramatic. Despite all of that, if you are like most people that I experience with, a voice from inside of you is going to be whispering to most of the key stuff that I say, if not all of it. That's true. And somehow I have always known it. You're not telling me something new. You're shining a spotlight on something that somehow I've always known, and you're just kind of reminding me. This is my experience of most of the people that find their way into my orbit. That this is what happens, even if there's a bunch of noise in their head along the lines of what I just shared. This gets louder ultimately. That may be your experience, it may not. I want to start out with one of many video clips that are just designed to plant seeds.
Every age, every generation has its built-in assumptions that the world is flat, or that the world is round, etc. There are hundreds of hidden assumptions, things we take for granted that may or may not be true. Of course, in the vast majority of cases, historically, these things aren't true. So presumably, if history is any guide, much about what we take for granted about the world simply isn't true. But we're locked into these precepts without even knowing it oftentimes. That's a paradigm.
There is a method to my madness. I know how to take you on this journey to the infinite and create this transformation, even if it doesn't make sense to you. So as I mentioned, accept each puzzle piece and assemble them as best as you can as you get them. The big picture will become clear to you. This is very important. No matter what your experience in these next 2 days, and no matter what kind of noise may be circulating in your head, If you decide to take this journey, you will prove to yourself through experiences in your own life that you cannot deny or argue with that every single thing that I'm telling you here is true. Even the wildest, most outlandish parts. And a lot of it is wild and very outlandish. But you'll prove it to yourself if you take this journey. Except for feeling a resonance and recognizing that the truth with capital T's is there, doesn't matter whether you agree with any of this stuff or there's noise in your head, you will prove it beyond the shadow of a doubt to yourself when you go back to your life if you take this journey, which is your choice. Like Morpheus in that video, I can only show you the truth and open a gateway, and then the rest will be up to you. This is an important point, too. Raise your hand if you know someone who has been a spiritual teacher of some kind who had an experience in their life, spontaneously found themselves in an expanded state and really have no idea how they got there, except they were just there. And they teach from that position, but they don't know how they got there, so they can't give you the steps to get into the same place. Even if they offer steps to get you somewhere, it isn't how they got there. Everything I'm going to talk about in these next 2 days is the model that I use to get into an extraordinary place that I'll be talking to you about, and the tools I'm going to share with you tomorrow are the tools that I use to get there. I didn't have a near-death experience. I didn't have some wild something and found myself aware of all of this stuff. This is the way I got there. I have deep personal experience with everything that I'm sharing with you, even the most outlandish parts. None of this is theory. None of this is recycled intellectual ideas that I thought were cool, and so I started sharing, which is what happens a lot in the self-help world. Somebody comes across a very sexy idea, they like it, they resonate with it, they start teaching it. No personal experience with it being truthful or not. It just seemed like it made sense, or they had a lot of respect for the teacher. I did some of this in my 20s and earlier parts of my life too. It's not an integrity thing, it's just what happens. But I've had deep personal experience, and at this point I've had experience with thousands of people around the world taking the same journey, and their stories and what's happened with them. You can test me on this if you choose to. You'll see that it's true. You always hear this at seminars, but this place in particular is not the time or place to be shy. Ask questions. I'm here to help you journey to the infinite. I can do that, but you've got to make sure you get what you need. So don't be shy. My preference is that you ask all questions in front of the audience so that everybody can benefit. If for some reason you feel a need to do something privately, still do it. Just ask me at a break or when the sessions are over in the evening or whatever it is, but make sure you get what you need. This is an extraordinary opportunity, and take advantage of it. This is a very important request that I have since the room is mixed. If you have familiarity with my work, which those of you that are new will soon understand the Phase 2 label there, please do not ask questions on a topic that I have not covered here yet. Wait. Or ask me privately if you just got to ask it now, you know. But wait, don't ask me about the tools today in front of the group when I haven't covered them, or some of the other stuff that I haven't covered. Wait till you've seen me cover it, and then it's fair game to ask questions about whatever I've covered. So since the room's mixed, that's a very important request I have for you. These slides, as I said, are my guitar. They're designed to keep me on track and make it easy for me to communicate, and make sure I don't wander off onto tangents and let me use a lot of multimedia resources. They're also designed to aid you in what I call multisensory learning and integration of the material, not creating the suntan effect, creating actual transformation. So everything that happens here is very important and goes deeper than it probably will become clear to you in the way it was designed. Just let them wash over you. You don't need to take any notes at all here. It's one of the things that's very different. If you want to jot something down, you could jot down an aha that you get, but resist any temptation you may have to want to write down stuff that you say here, or write down stuff you hear me say. This isn't about that. This is not an intellectual deal. This is a completely different experience, and you just can let everything wash over you. The reality is, which is a brilliant thing I'll talk about in a different context later, is what typically happens when people take notes at seminars anyway. They're here because they want to get some great benefit, right? But then they're writing all the time, and when they're writing, they're not paying attention to what's going on, so they're losing part of it. And then everything that they're writing ends up going on some shelf somewhere, and with most cases, they don't ever even look at it again. So it's a brilliant creation of self-sabotage under the guise of being smart and helping to get the benefits. You don't need to do that here. You don't even need to jot down the ahas. You're not going to lose them if they're truly significant to you. But that's what I would encourage you. If you're going to write anything, just write an aha that you get. But not anything you hear me say or that you see up here. There is no need. That's not what this is about. It's a very different experience. How I got here and why I'm doing this event. This is my grandfather. His name was Aaron Scheinfeld. He passed away in 1970. He was an absolutely extraordinary man. From a money game business perspective, he created a company out of an idea that most of you probably heard of, Manpower, the world's largest temporary help agency, turned that from an idea into a gigantic global worldwide success. I think last year Manpower did $18 billion. It was like 140 on the Fortune 500, so gigantic success from that perspective, and was brilliant. But beyond that, to this day, he is a model of one of the happiest people and most joyful people. I remember him having us on his lap playing the ukulele and the piano and doing all these silly things, even when he was in his upper 60s or whatever, and was just so joyful and happy. And growing up in this family with this gigantic success, I became aware at age 12 of these rumblings that there was something mysterious about the secret to his success. And either nobody knew what it was, which is what it turned out to be, or they weren't talking about it. And so being the in-your-face, why, driving you crazy kind of a kid, when I was 12, I just started bugging the shit out of him. And by the way, I like swearing for effect at times. So if it offends you, too bad. And he just kept kind of putting me off and putting me off and putting me off. And then the whole extended family was in a small town in Switzerland called Cron, celebrating his 70th birthday. And he came up to me and he said, all right, you've been bugging me and bugging me. I'm going to answer some of your questions. And we went into town and had a cup of hot chocolate together. And he started talking to me. Now, again, I was a 12-year-old kid. So 12-year-old kids have limits in what they can understand. So he started talking to me that there was the visible world and the invisible world, and the real power was in the invisible world. And if you could map out and understand what was going on in the invisible world and you could tap that power, you could do anything that you wanted in the physical world, visible world. And he said, now, when you grow up, you're going to hear about stuff like the subconscious mind and all this. I'm not talking about that. This is something completely different. And he said, I learned about this invisible world, and I learned how to tap that. And everything you've seen, Manpower, he didn't say at the time, I don't think, my happiness, but there was something, everything you think is great about me, I attribute to me having learned how to tap this power source. Now, I held this guy in very high self-esteem, high esteem. So anything he said, I just took as gospel. So all of a sudden, at a very young age, he started me on what I now call the treasure hunt of the century to try and map this out. Because what happened is, he told me a bunch of stuff, some of which I got, some of which I didn't, but just as I mentioned before, I knew there was something magical and powerful about what he was talking about. And then he died 7 months later. Before he could fully brief me on what it is that he knew, both of us had the expectation that he would be mentoring me for a long time, but that isn't what happened. So what it really amounted to was a gigantic tease in a lot of ways. But it started me on a journey and created within me an obsession to map out this invisible world and be able to tap this power source at a very young age. And I was 12, so I forgot about it for a while. Kind of bug in my ear, but I forgot about it for a while until I got into my 20s and started seriously searching. And to use the metaphor I shared with you earlier, he gave me a bunch of puzzle pieces, but not the picture. And I spent, the puzzle pieces I'm going to be giving you here became visible to me when I was 46. So we're coming up on 5 years. So I spent from age 12 to age 46, 34 years, I guess, assembling pieces and thinking I had the picture at various points, but then became clear I didn't. Because the number I kept running in my life was up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And from a business and money perspective, every time I ran a cycle, the numbers got bigger. So when I was in my 20s, it was up, down with thousands, and then tens of thousands, and then hundreds of thousands. And then when I started doing it with millions, and meanwhile, I'm studying everything that's out there, like most of you. And then at some point, I developed my own model, which was really working great. And when there was an up cycle, I thought, okay, I finally got it, you know. And then when I crashed and burned again, I had to say, okay, I'm still missing something. But when it got to the millions up and down, and it looked like I was going to crash and burn again after a gigantic success, and I had a wife and 2 kids, and we had a lifestyle that we really enjoyed, and I thought to myself, if I crash this time, I got a high threshold of pain, and I'm used to picking myself up and healing my bones, and, you know, but I'm not willing to do this again. And so, and by the way, what I'm about to tell you is not a formula, because I've done it lots of times in my life and nothing happened. But this particular time, I got angry at the higher aspect of myself that you'll hear me refer to here as the expanded self. I got really mad, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm 45 years old, 45 and a half, whatever it is. You started me on this journey when I was 12. I've been doing the work. I've done my due diligence. I've done this up-down thing. I've worked and worked and worked and stayed miserable and unhappy and tortured and all this kind of stuff. And now I got a family and kids, and I'm not going to do this anymore. So either you give me whatever the hell I'm missing or get me the hell out of here, because I'm not going to do this anymore. I won't run this cycle anymore. I'm obviously missing something. So I want to know what it is, and I want to know what it is now, or take me in my sleep tonight. You know what I mean? All these humorous things. Make sure that you don't take me in a way that my family doesn't get the life insurance, and, you know, and I don't want it to be long and painful, but if you're not going to give me the final puzzle pieces, I'm out of here. I won't do this. And I got really mad, and a door opened shortly thereafter that led me to what we're doing here. And the interesting thing is, if you had met me, I would say 5 years ago or earlier, and somebody said, give me a few words to describe Scheinfeld, people would have said some complimentary things. People would have said some uncomplimentary things. People might have said he's brilliant, he's driven, he's this or he's that. Nobody would have said the guy's happy, the guy is very fulfilled, the guy is very peaceful and enjoying his life. Nobody. And if you had asked me in those years, give me one word to describe yourself, I would have said tortured. And I would have meant it, because that's the way I felt. And it was like no matter what I did, nothing really got any better. I was always angry, I was always frustrated, and I was always unhappy. And then I had these up-downs with these gigantic successes, and then it would all be taken away, and then an even bigger one, and it would all be taken away. And I just got angrier and angrier and angrier at this higher aspect of myself and at what was going on until I got to that point, which then opened this door that led to what we're going to be working with here. But that's the journey, and he started it when I was 12. And a lot of people say, do you think he knew what you're sharing here? And I don't know the answer. I never asked him. Other people say, where did he get it? And I don't know, because I never asked him that either. So it does, as you'll see as we move through the next, it doesn't really matter, because it's all made up anyway. It's just a story. But in the story, I don't know the answer to those kinds of questions, except we wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be in this extraordinary place I find myself living if he had not started me on this journey with that kind of credibility and that kind of a tease that I now call, I don't know if I mentioned this, the treasure hunt of the century. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for what started for me when I was 12. So I will always be grateful to him. And if I have any sadness about anything really at this point in my life, I do still sometimes wish I could have gotten to know him as an adult. My brother was older and kind of got to know him as an adult, but I never did. I only had funny, cute grandfather and then this amazing dump that came at that hot chocolate thing. But so that's kind of the journey that led us here, started by him. This is a good quote to pay attention to as we're moving into this journey. The seeker after truth should be humbler than the dust. The world crushes dust under its feet, but the seeker after truth, with a capital T, should so humble himself that even dust could crush him. Only then and not until then will he have a glimpse of truth. Now, I would word this differently if I was writing that, but the key message of it is You got to be willing to challenge and put a question mark after everything that you thought was true coming in here, and have the best that you can do of having an open mind, or you can never see what the truth is, because the truth is so far opposite what we think it is that if you can't have that openness, it won't go in. Humbler is a different way. I wouldn't use that word, but it's a wonderful quote that gets to the heart of it anyway. All right, so let's go into the philosophy. For as long as there have been human beings have been haunted by three questions. And you hear this everywhere from people at every level of success and achievement and whatever in life. The first is, who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? You study history, you study all kinds of things. These things have tortured people forever. These three questions. Now, my belief is we can't be absolutely certain about the answers to those questions. To me, the truth with capital T's is too big, it's too complex, and we can't get our hands around it from our current level of consciousness. Not possible. So the best we can do is create a model that gets us close enough to the truth to give us practical value in our lives. You with me on that? There are some mysteries about life. Who are we? You know, where do we really come from? I humorously refer to where we came from as infinite land. What are the details of infinite land, and how does an infinite being really live before they came here to play that we're going to talk about? I don't know. I mean, we're never going to know while we're at this level of consciousness, and it isn't important. We came here to do this. That'll take care of itself. But there's some mysteries we just are never going to know. But we can get close enough to the ones that do matter to have practical value, and that's what this is about. So I am going to offer you a model for your consideration. Now, I think this is going to be a whiz-bang technology thing that I love, and I hope you get a kick out of. Yes, here we go. Hear me when I say this. It's a model that gets us close enough to the truth to give us practical value, and that's all. Here's another one. Get ready. I saw that and I had to use it. I mean, but it's just a model. You can break it if you want to. You can argue with it if you want to. You can deny it if you want to. You can find inconsistencies in places where it doesn't matter. It's just a model. And I'll talk more about this in a different way tomorrow afternoon after you've got more pieces of it. But that's all it is. It isn't the truth with capital T's. It's a model that gets us close enough, and it tracks really, really well. But it's just a model that gets us close enough to give us practical value, and everything beyond that isn't important. If you had it, it wouldn't contribute in any way, shape, or form to your quality of life or what happens. Not necessary. But the really necessary, important transformational components are included with this model, and it gets close enough to be eerily powerful, just to use that term. All right, so let's start with the component of the model for who am I. Raise your hand if you have heard or studied or listened to or whatever, heard somebody say something along the lines of, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. Look around the room. Just about everybody. I agree with that. And I go a little bit deeper into what it really means, but I agree with that. Who you really are is an infinitely powerful being, an infinitely wise being, an infinitely abundant being in everything. Money, stuff, joyfulness, happiness, whatever. More abundant than you can possibly imagine is who you really are. You have an unlimited desire and ability to play and express yourself creatively, which is what is most important to who you really are, is to play and express yourself creatively in a myriad of ways that have no limits or restrictions. You're so much more than who you think you are, which you've been told before. But it doesn't do you a lot of good if everything that's going on in your life, you're still limited and restricted. So somebody tells you you're really the spiritual, amazing, godlike being. Well, great. What am I supposed to do with that? I would like some of that infiniteness right now. Thank you very much. And that's where the ball gets dropped so much in the way. But you'll see why it was such a brilliant strategy. So this is who you really are. Now let's take a look. We're going to talk more about all of this, but let's take a look briefly at why you're here. You came here to play a game. Now, a lot of people will come up to me and they'd say, that's not a very spiritual reason. There's got to be something deeper or more important or significant than I came here to play a game. No. You came here to play a game. I call it the human game. And as you'll soon see, it is a really amazing game. But that's what we came here to do. We came here to play a game. Let's take a look at what your purpose is. Your general purpose is to play the human game. To explore, to express yourself creatively, to challenge yourself, and to have fun. That's your general purpose. That's what all of us are doing here. Your specific purpose is to play the human game, explore, express yourself creatively, challenge yourself, have fun in the unique and precise ways you chose. We are all unique, infinite beings who will want to play this game for unique reasons and play it in unique reasons. For unique reasons and in unique ways. And even if it looks like some of us are pursuing similar things or in similar ways, we're not. Everything is custom designed by us, for us, to play this amazing game in a unique way. And it's always unique, even when it doesn't look like it is. That's the specific purpose. And it doesn't go any deeper than that, nor does it need to. But as we'll talk more about later, the overlay of, no, there's got to be something more deep and significant is a brilliant strategy to pretty much negate anything that you would really love and enjoy doing. It's a brilliant strategy, but we'll get more into that later. But that's it. It's a game. Now, all games are based on a concept, rules, regulations, a specific structure, and they're played on a specific field or a board or whatever it is, depending on which game you're looking at. The games only work if the concepts, rules, and regulations are accepted and followed by the players. If somebody in a football game got tackled and they said, no, I'm not down, and they got up and continued running and all the players did that, you couldn't play the game. Now, we all see examples of people who break the rules, but in general, the rules are followed in most games, and what happens if you break them? Or there's a penalty or whatever it is. So in general, but the games wouldn't work if people didn't agree to follow the rules and regulations that are unique to whatever that game happens to be. And it's the same thing with the human game. The concept behind the human game is exploring what happens when you limit unlimited power. If you are an infinite being who is in a constant state of off-the-charts joyfulness or unconditional love, whatever your favorite label is, and you have the power to snap your finger and do anything, including create entire universes that are very complex and dense with all kinds of life forms in them, and you're infinitely abundant of everything, and that's what your natural state is, this could be a pretty sexy thing to explore as a game. What would happen if I limited it? That's where this started. And I humorously say that there are a bunch of infinite beings running around an infinite land that said, I wonder what would happen if we created an example where we could experience what it would be like to be limited and explore that limitation. Could we even do it in the first place? And if so, how would we do it? And then what would the experience be like? And what kinds of fun and opportunities for creative expression and exploration might there be if we could pull that off? And that's where it started. Golf is to get the balls in the holes with the fewest number of strokes. Basketball is to get the ball through the hoop and score points. Baseball is to get as many runs. That's what the goal is of all of it. They all have these rules and regulations and structures and intents. This is what the game is all about from behind the scenes. Exploring what happens and what's possible when you limit unlimited power, and can we even do it? Because what you're really saying is, could God convince itself it's not God? That it's actually the opposite of what it is. If it's infinitely wise, powerful, and abundant, could it convince itself it's stupid, poor, weak, and at the mercy of forces beyond its control? That is one gigantic challenge.
Isn't that what we've done? I mean, haven't we accomplished that?
Yeah, which we'll get to.
Okay.
Brilliantly. An almost impossible task. So you start out as an infinitely wise being, infinitely abundant being, infinitely powerful being, In a constant state of off-the-charts joyfulness and unconditional love, or again, whatever label you'd like to use for that feeling. Because as we'll talk about, but not much in the next 2 days, there is only one feeling that an infinite being feels. And you can call it whatever you want. For me, if you took every so-called positive emotion or good feeling and you put it all in one container, I call the container joyfulness. That's my label. You don't need to use it. It doesn't matter. But when joyfulness, it's the ultimate one feeling that is the only thing an infinite being can really feel. But you can call it unconditional love or serenity or whatever you might like, or some other word I've never heard of. But this is my label, joyfulness. Oh, and by the way, I got this new whiz-bang toy, so I might as well demonstrate it to you now. That's my label. All right, so to play the limitation game, you've got to forget who you really are completely. Completely obliterate any memory of who you really are and where you really came from and what the truth is. Forget how abundant you really are. Hide all your power, wisdom, and joyfulness because you can't make it go away. All you can do is hide it. And convince yourself you're the opposite of who you really are. That's what we had to do in order to make this game work and give ourselves the opportunity to play it. And you have to break yourself into tiny little squares and whirl across the world. So to pull it off, if you're in infinite land and you're in all this infinite abundance, you can't convince yourself there that you're the opposite and make any of this stuff happen. So you've got to create an alternative reality. You've got to create an illusory playing field on which to play this human game. Otherwise, you can't possibly pull it off. Infinite beings aren't stupid. They're not going to play the game up there and then get lost and lose all their power and never be able to come back. So they got to create another reality, an illusory playing field on which to play this human game. You've also got to create another aspect of yourself, who is who you all think you are, to be the player on that field of that game. You've then got to invest tremendous effort and power convincing yourself that the alternative reality, the illusory playing field, is real. And that you're the opposite of who you really are within it. That's job number one. You've got to convince yourself the illusion is real and you're the opposite of who you really are within it. This is one of many what I'll call throughout the next 2 days cosmic jokes. How does the human game begin? You're a helpless and powerless infant. You couldn't, and I love babies, so don't misunderstand. I'm leveraging this heavily to make a point. You couldn't be any more stupid, powerless, weak, or at the mercy of forces beyond your control than when you're born. It's no accident that that's how this game starts. It's telegraphing what the point of the game is from moment one, that we start that way. Neil's going to have some fun with this tonight, but that's how the game actually starts, and that is no accident. That's the truth staring you in the face, except it's cleverly disguised. Until some psycho like me comes along and pops the balloon. All right, you've also got to leave yourself clues about where you hid your power, wisdom, abundance, and joyfulness so you can reclaim it later. Again, we're not stupid. Although, raise your hand if you have studied some spiritual body of work that said, we're these amazing, infinite, godlike beings, and we came here to explore physicality, and then we got lost. And now we're stuck here, and we can't get back. Raise your hand if you've studied something like that. There is stuff like that out there. I'm surprised more hands didn't go up, but there's a lot of stuff out there that talks about the truth, but then it distorts it. We got lost, and now we're stuck here. And all these ascended masters and everybody else is trying to rescue us because we got stuck here in physicality when we didn't intend to. It's wild if you think about it. So, you've got to leave yourself clues about where the truth is, and you've got to have the real you, your infinite being self, that I will call the expanded self for the purposes of these next 2 days. You can use any label you want. You can use any words you want. The one thing I will invite you to do if you choose to take this journey is, and I'll talk about this more tomorrow, don't use labels that you used to use when you were playing the other game. Don't call this your higher self, which is heavily related to the old game. If you used to call something whatever call it something different, but it doesn't have to be any of the words I use. These are just the words I use. But come up with something new because you're playing a new game. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. So the real you, using the movie metaphor, becomes the writer, the director, and the producer of this movie that is your human game adventure. If you're going to be here playing and you don't know what's going on, somebody's got to. And someone's got to be driving the bus that knows what's going on, is going to get you where you really wanted to go when you came here to play. And you've got to have your expanded self support, guide, and protect you, so to speak, from behind the scenes as you play when you're blind, which is what we all are when we're playing for most of the game, if not all of it, until you move into what we're doing with here. We'll get more into that later. Now, I use a metaphor to help lock a lot of this in that we're going to play with a lot over the next 2 days. I compare who we really are, the infinite godlike being that we really are, to the sun. You think of the sun and you think of tremendous power and light and energy and whatever. So that's who we really are, but to come here and play, we had to create a very solid, dense cloud cover that blocked that out. Now, if this is a real cloudy day and it really looks like that, is the sun still there behind, yes or no?
Yes.
If we're in the middle of a hurricane, is the sun still there, yes or no?
Yes.
If it's raining, is the sun still there?
Yes.
Where is it? It's just hidden. But it's there, it doesn't go away. You can't see it, but it doesn't go away. It's a really brilliant metaphor, and I want to go a little deeper here with a video that I just created for part of this movie project that I'm working on. Whenever we think of the sun, we think instantly of huge amounts of power and light and heat. And so it's a great metaphor for the power and presence of who you really are. Now, from that infiniteness, as we discussed, we created the illusion of this physical universe as a playing field on which we could play the human game. And then, in order to make phase 1 of the human game work, we had to create a solid, dense cloud cover, which is the whole process of convincing ourselves that the illusion is real and that we are the opposite of who we really are within it. So we create this solid, dense cloud cover, and I want you to think solid and dense, you know, like concrete or like steel or something. Very solid, very dense, very difficult to get through. And when we do that, everything in the illusion, everything on the other side of the cloud cover, metaphorically, becomes dark and cold compared to the sun, the infiniteness of who we really are. Now, if you're the opposite of who you really are while playing this game, things cannot work perfectly. Because do they work perfectly in your natural state if you're an infinite being, yes or no? Yes. So if your goal is to convince yourself you're the opposite of who you really are, can they be allowed to? No. There has to be problems. Things cannot ever work perfectly, although you can get teased like you're just about to, or it seems like your ducks are in a row or whatever. But the point of the game in phase 1 is to convince yourself you're the opposite, so that ain't never going to happen. In phase 1, we'll get more into this. You've got to be uncomfortable most of the time. Even if you get moments of what you might call happiness or joyfulness, which are pale imitations of how you really feel all the time. The best you've ever felt in this human game is nothing compared to how you really feel, and how you really feel all the time, no matter what's going on. So you've got to feel uncomfortable, because again, if you're the opposite of who you really are, if you're really joyful all the time, you can't be that way at the beginning of playing this game. True joy, peace, satisfaction, and fulfillment cannot ever be felt in that segment of the game. Although we will tease ourselves or have an elusive, brief, temporary experience of it. Blocks and resistance to success have got to be common. It's got to happen when that's the rule and the concept of the game. Here's one of my favorites, just because I spent so much time in that world. Teasing, myths, and fluff, especially in the self-help world, have got to be common. You've got to be told over and over and over, you got all this power and you can do all these amazing things. You just have to have the right technique, except then the techniques don't really work, or they don't work reliably, or they fail more than they succeed. This has to be part of the game, which is why it is. There's something missing or wrong has got to nag at you somewhere, whether it's very conscious or it's not, That's got to be there, because it doesn't make any sense. As we'll get into more and more, and you'll see more and more if you take this journey, phase 1 of the human game is a lunatic asylum. If you really look, nothing makes any sense. You can create a logical storyline to explain it, but it doesn't really make any sense. Like, I'll give you one of my favorite pet peeves. This was in the book. Whenever, to me, something is out in the world that a business does, I always had this metaphor of there was a conference room at the top of a skyscraper, and the executives of that company, all intelligent people, sat at that conference table and talked about it and decided to do it. And then I would think, how in that scenario could a bunch of intelligent people, most of whom have kids, plot a strategy to get kids addicted to cigarettes knowing it's going to kill a bunch of them? Doesn't make any sense. Now, there's a storyline. If we were to interview a bunch of the executives, there would be a story that we would be told, but it really doesn't make any sense. Most of the stuff in phase 1, if you really look, doesn't make any sense because it can't. This is the goal. This isn't who you really are, but you're convincing yourself it is. So there's got to be something about it that just doesn't really make any sense if you really look, except we don't look because that's not the design of the game. Few experts get these critical points because most times when you go into the self-help world, which I'm highlighting with my little green laser right now, in the self-help world, what do they tell you? You can have it all. You can get all your ducks in a row. You can get your money working and your relationships and your health and your business and everything else. You can get it all lined up. You can have the perfect life. Except the reality is, nobody ever gets it. Nobody. There's always one part of the life that's out of whack, that's out of sync. And if it appears that they're all in alignment, it doesn't last. Something drops somewhere. Even if you think, well, you know, I can look at somebody that's in the media, or I can look at a friend of mine, and from the outside it looks like they got all their ducks. They don't. Or if it appears that they do, then let's just, for lack of a better term, the level of joyfulness, the level of fulfillment, the level of fun and excitement is way depressed over what would be possible for them to really experience given who they really are. So there's always, it isn't really all your ducks in a row, even if it seems like it. But in most cases, it isn't there. It just appears to be. But we keep searching. We're kind of like dogs at the racetrack. You know, they chase that mechanical rabbit. They can never catch it. Never. By design. I suppose there's probably been a case, and somebody will probably write me someday and say, well, there was a time at da-da-da-da track where the mechanical rabbit broke. And all the dogs pounced on it and stopped racing. So there you go, Robert, you're wrong. But you know what I mean. By design, we chase it, but we never get it. In phase 1 of the human game, we chase it, but we never actually get it, even if we think that we do, and even if we claim that we do. And this was the thing that was so painful to me in the story that I told you before. Because I was the kind of guy in phase 1, if I was committed to something and somebody said, you got to do these 10 steps. And you got to do it this way, you know. You got to stand on one foot, and you got to lean back, and you got to hold your ear, and then go like this, you know. I did it. Anally, down to the whatever. And I did it over and over and over and over again, and nothing was getting any better. And it really bothered me because I thought to myself, I'm running, like I said, I'm doing the work. Why isn't this happening? And until I got some of these insights that I'm sharing with you, and by the way, if you take a scenario like that, which most of you have, you get a formula that's supposed to work, the teacher of it worked for, lots of testimonials of other people it worked for, and then you go apply it anally and it doesn't work, where do you go with that? Got to be something wrong with me. The guru it works for, all these other people stood up and said it's awesome and I got da-da-da-da with it. If it's not working for me, got to be something wrong with me. Is there something wrong with an infinite being? What's the point of phase 1 of the human game? Anything that reinforces there's something wrong with me is part of the design. I'm jumping ahead again, but a few of us in here have a friend who's one of the world's foremost experts on self-esteem. And they say that the average kid, by the time they're 9, is filled with there's something wrong with me stuff. Goes deeper in some than others, different storylines, different experiences, but the net of it is by the time they're 9, they've got deeply installed "there's something wrong with me" stuff. That has to happen if you're going to convince yourself you're the opposite of who you really are. We're going to talk more about that. So, I think I have talk about that in a different way. So, here's the really interesting thing. Here is who you really are. This is now in place, blocking it. You're now in the black and white, cold world playing the human game in phase 1. If, while you're in this black and white, cold world, you go to a seminar and you learn a strategy and you make $10 million, has the cloud cover moved? No. You're still in the black and white, cold world. If you're a Vietnam War vet and you're tortured with some emotional something and you get an emotional help technique, and most of them don't work for those folks, for example, which is the reason I bring it up, but some do. And you get that relieved, has the cloud cover been knocked out, yes or no? You're still here. You're still in phase 1. You've deleted one program, so to speak, that was causing you pain, but you're still here. This is still here, hasn't been dented at all, and this is still blocked. And the point here is to keep you convinced the illusion is real and you're the opposite of who you really are. None of it has changed just because you've used some self-help technique or something to make an illusory change in the illusion. Are you with me? Real transformation only takes place when you start to drill holes in this, which we'll talk about later, and you drill tunnels in here and the sun starts to shine in and brighten and colorize and power up this illusion. That's when real transformation takes place. You exchange one illusion for another illusion here, and this is still in place. You're still in phase 1 of the human game. This work is about knocking out the cloud cover, which we're going to talk about. So that while you're still here, playing in this, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, amusement park, which is what it is, you can be here, you can be playing here and play all the games that are available here and create games that never even existed here before with all of the infiniteness of who you really are available to you. That's what this game is about. That's the promise of so many self-help techniques, but they can't take you there because they are here. And they don't help you to knock this out. Even if the language would suggest that it does, it doesn't. So yes, you can create changes in here, and it can appear to get better, but it's still black and white and cold, and this is still here blocking out the truth of who you really are. And deep down, you're still convinced the illusion is real and you're the opposite of who you really are. And as long as that's happening, you're going to be the dog chasing the mechanical rabbit at the track and never catching it. By design, not because there's anything wrong with you. Because that's the design of the game. Are you with me on this? It's very important.
Our limiting beliefs is what I'm trying.
Partly. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. The cloud cover is everything that you did to convince yourself you're the opposite of who you really are. Which includes beliefs, but it includes a lot of other things too. But we'll talk more about that. I mentioned this. I just want to hammer it home. This is the truth with capital T's. But do we hear the opposite message all the time? Do we fall for it? And if you're like me, and you may not be, you may have been kinder to yourself. The path of trying to get them in a row and it not working ultimately deepens the phase 1 dynamic because ultimately you turn it on yourself. Hell's the matter with me. I must not have done it right. Must be stupid, whatever is the pattern that we run. Here is a really great example that happened to me recently. Raise your hand if you know this guy's music. I did not, but we were invited to go see him a week ago, I think. Was it a week ago or 2 weeks ago? And I had heard about him tangentially, but I didn't really know anything about him, and I didn't know his music. And we were invited to this concert into this box, and it was just... And this guy just totally blew me away in a way that I've never been blown away at a concert before. I watched this guy, and he was, to me, when somebody is so amazingly awesome at something, whatever it is, I call them masters of the universe. And I was watching this guy. This guy is a master of the universe. I mean, he must have played 8 guitars And he was just brilliant on all of them. And the lyrics, to me anyway, you might disagree, were brilliant. And then when he'd blown me away with guitar and all this stuff, then he came out and was brilliant on the keyboards. And I was thinking to myself, this guy's a master of the universe, and I'm loving this concert. And the guy, he was exuding all this joyfulness in playing on stage and interacting with the audience and everything. And then I remembered, by the way, this is his wife that he just married, Nicole Kidman. And I thought to myself, this guy's a master of the universe. He's married to a woman that most people think is one of the most beautiful, sexy women on the planet. And then I remembered, just after he married her, he checked into the Betty Ford Clinic because of alcohol abuse after previously gone through recovery from cocaine abuse. Now, I know everything I'm sharing with you here, but the thought that went in my mind is, what could this master of the universe be so unhappy about? He's got thousands of people cheering him on and buying it, and money is not a problem, and women are dropping at his feet, and he's got this drop-dead gorgeous body because he hires 4 personal trainers to help him do all these different things. And just was so, and the thought, which is what I call phase 1 residue that we'll talk about later, I thought going through, oh, what could he be so unhappy about? He's unhappy because the cloud cover's still in place, and it doesn't matter what happens in the black and white cold world, because I thought to myself, something's got to be eating at the guy. Something very old from his childhood has got to be eating at him. Well, guess what? There's something eating at all of us, because it has to be, or we couldn't come here to play this game and pull off what I call the miracle of phase 1. It doesn't matter what you do in the illusion. Deep down, as long as the cloud cover is there, that's what's going to happen. You've all seen stories of this. Hollywood actors and actresses, multimillionaires, CEOs of famous companies, politicians, everybody that it seems like, and then you find out they're an alcoholic, or they're a drug addict, or they're this or that, or they've done this or that crazy kind of a thing, when they really had it all and ought to be happy. And the other really amazing thing is, we still, despite having seen all these examples of that, we still all chase it. And most of us don't think about it, but if we did, we'd probably say, well, I'll be different. If I became a rock star and had all this money and all this adulation and everything else, I would be happy. He's screwed up. But we've seen so many examples of it. More money doesn't make you happier, but we still chase the more money. Finding the right relationship. If something's eating at you, the right relationship either isn't going to work or you still aren't going to feel happy, which is what happened with him. Marries this incredible woman, didn't matter, this thing was still eating at him. And he kept hearing this banging all the time. Doesn't matter. If the cloud cover's in place and you're convinced you're the opposite of who you really are, deep down, even if you can spout a bunch of enlightened stuff about you being something else, deep down we are all convinced we're the opposite of who we really are and that the illusion is real. We did a number on ourselves brilliantly. And by the way, if you ever get an opportunity to see him in concert, he is a master of the universe. I mean, it's unbelievable. And there are a whole bunch of people in this box with us that never heard of him either. Didn't even like country or rock music and thought he puts on an amazing show. So raise your hand and be honest. Did a question like this cross your mind in what I just shared? If you're infinitely abundant, wise, and joyful and powerful, why the hell would you want to convince yourself you're the opposite of who you are? It seems like a pretty fucked up game. Why would you leave that for this? All right, well, there's 2 ways to answer the question. 1, why do I say we, but you think of it as you? Watch, play, or pursue any game, sport, hobby, interest, or pastime. Why? Why do you do it? Excitement, fun, challenge. We could list a whole bunch of things, but that's why we do all this stuff. So that's the first answer. Why would an infinite being do it? Because it's fun, interesting, challenge, opportunities to play, express yourself creatively, and in this case, as I mentioned before, can I even pull it off in the first place? Raise your hand if you have not seen The Matrix. Okay, you're not going to quite get what I'm talking about here, but most of you will, and if you go see it afterwards, which I recommend you do, you'll be able to pick up this reference. Raise your hand if you remember the scene in The Matrix when Neo is going into this building and he sees this cat that appears to go by twice that's a glitch in The Matrix. I totally forgot why I was bringing that up. So anyway, here's the second way to answer the question. It'll probably come back to me.
and how they could invent a sport like golf. Here's my idea for a fucking sport. I knock a ball in a gopher hole.
Oh, you mean like pool?
Fuck off, pool! Not with a straight stick, with a little fucked up stick. I whack the ball that goes in a gopher hole.
Oh, you mean like croquet?
Fuck croquet! I put the hole hundreds of yards away! Oh, fuck out, yeah! It's great fun there! Oh, yeah, that's a great thing!
Oh, like a bowling thing.
Fuck no! Not straight, I put shit in the way! Like trees and bushes and high grass, so you can lose your fucking ball and go whacking away with a fucking tire iron. Whacking away, and each time you miss, you feel like you're gonna have a stroke. Fuck, that's what we'll call it. A stroke, because every time you miss, you feel like you're gonna fucking die. Oh, great. Oh, and here's a better part. Oh, fuck, this is brilliant. Right near the end, I'll put a flat piece with a little flag to give you fucking hope. But then I'll put a pool and a sandbox to fuck with your ball again. Ah, you'll be there trashing your ass, jerking away in the sand.
Oh, and you do this one time.
Fuck no! 18 fucking times!
Seems insane on the surface, but why do people do it? Fun, challenge, whatever, the list. It's not the details of the game, it's the what of the game. If we're going to pick one word, what might be word number one for why we do it? Challenge. You look at that game from that perspective, it seems nuts. You look at why would an infinite being want to explore? It seems nuts, but look at this. What greater challenge could there be for an infinite being to then convince itself it's the opposite? To successfully hide all the power, the wisdom, and the abundance and convince yourself. What greater challenge could there be for a being like that? Now, this is a great example for me to say to you, no matter what noise there might be in your head about this particular issue, you will give yourself a direct experience of the truth of it at some point if you choose to take this journey. It won't be an intellectual understanding. It will be a direct experience of the truth of this. And you'll go back to your life after you've gone through these 2 days and you're going to see the forgetting machine in operation everywhere. The reinforcing you're the opposite of who you really are and the illusion. You're going to see it everywhere. And sometimes you're going to laugh, and sometimes you're going to be entertained, and sometimes you're going to be really mad. But you're going to see it. And then you're going to have a direct experience of this is what this is all about, beyond the shadow of any doubt. Because this is the truth with capital T's, even though there's an element of it that this is just a model of. But at the core of it, this is what we're all doing here. Okay, a couple of other things just to hammer that point home. Who would like a taste? Monitor how you feel about this right now, not what you think about it, because you can make up all kinds of stories about why that's a screwed up game, couldn't be true, it's got to be deeper and more significant than that or whatever. Just monitor how you feel about it as we've been going through this, number one. Number two, which I addressed before, deep down, how do most people really feel about themselves, other people, and the world? I have statistics that I didn't put here, but you look at how many people are abusing alcohol, are drug addicts, are on Prozac, are doing all these kinds of things to try and change the way they feel. You look at all these statistics, the self-esteem stuff I mentioned before. The definition of feeling the opposite of who you really are is how just about everybody, including you, deep down, even if you would deny it and argue with me about it and say, no, I'm really a pretty happy person, deep down, the definition of being the opposite of who you really are is how most people feel most of the time. And even if they've covered it up, it's there, underneath, seething. I knew some of this kind of stuff. I used to say in the beginning of sharing this work that I discovered, and it shocked the hell out of me, because if you met me in phase one and you said, hey, Robert, what do you think is one of your greatest strengths? I would have said my intellect. I would have actually said that I had this weird combination of fast logic and intuition that combined and were very powerful, but I would have put a lot of value in my intellect. I discovered on this journey that thinking is one of the most brilliant phase one creations, and it's the biggest joy inhibitor that there is. It was a brilliant technique to reinforce the whole phase one dynamic was thinking. And I lost where I was going with that, too. But if you really look at how most people feel deep down, that's how they feel. Stupid, poor to one degree or another, powerless, at the mercy of forces beyond their control, whether it's hurricanes and tornadoes or microbes and disease or it's other people or their boss or the IRS or whatever it is. Stupid, poor, powerless, weak, and at the mercy of forces beyond their control. Now you could say, Bill Gates doesn't feel poor. Well, let me ask you a question. I don't know if it's actually happened, but at some point he announced he was retiring from all daily operations of Microsoft. And he announced 7-year time frame. I think maybe it's coming up. It's not up yet. Let me ask you a question. Would he have done that if he was having fun? Yes or no? I have a friend who is a player of the Phase 2 game that we're going to talk about in a minute, worked for Microsoft for 8 years, was present at board meetings when Bill Gates came in crying because he couldn't understand why his company was being so viciously attacked by people so aggressively all over the world. Guy's not a happy camper in some major area just in that part of his life, or he wouldn't be leaving. So no, he's not poor from a money sense, but he's poor in another way, been still convinced that the world is that he's the opposite of who he really is and an illusion that's real. So every time you think there's an exception to this, if you pull back the curtain, the opposite of who we really are is always there. Oh, I know why I was telling that story. I could tell you intellect was a joy inhibitor, and that the reason we go into intellect, and the more we go into intellect, is because there's terror underneath. And if we go into intellect, we can muffle the feelings. We don't really have to deal with them. But we went in there in the first place because we couldn't deal with the feelings of terror and being so small and powerless and vulnerable at the mercy of forces beyond our control. I knew that was true. I could say it. But I took myself to an experience of feeling that terror. And when I felt what was there that I never had a clue of my whole life before that, it shocked the hell out of me. I experienced the symptoms of it. But I never came close to feeling that sucker that was buried inside of me. And I never had a clue of it. 46, 47 years. It was so buried and hidden. Because, by the way, if you really felt what being the opposite of who you really are really feels like, you'd go crazy. It has to be hidden in one way, shape, or form. The truth has to be, not just because it's the point of the game, but because we couldn't deal with it. If you really let it all in. So it shocked the hell out of me how much was sitting there. And it's true about everybody. Now, I said I was not a real happy camper when I was in Phase 1. But even if I had been more or whatever, that was sitting there. And with very few exceptions, unless through some spontaneous something or through some other path, somebody actually knocked out the cloud cover, no matter what anybody tells you, that's what's deep inside. They're running from it. They may not know it there, but that's what's deep inside because it has to be to pull off Phase 1 of the human game. You can't be convinced you're the opposite of who you really are if you're feeling joyful and abundant and everything's cranking along. And that's not the point of the game in Phase 1. The human game was created to be very complex and sophisticated to keep us interested and challenged and what? Fooled, distracted. If you're an infinite being and you decide to play a game, you can't just play some tiddlywink game. It's got to be the ultimate game. And as we're going to talk about, you've got to create layer after layer after layer after layer after layer of illusion before you're going to believe it's real. That's why I was telling the Matrix story. They knew something was up because that cat flipped like that in the Matrix. It was a clue. It was a mistake. And I'll be talking about that in a minute. That can't happen in a game like this. You stumble into something about the truth of who you really are, you start the game over. That cannot be allowed. That's why I was telling that story. So I've tied up those two loose ends. Thank you very much. Not as spacey as you thought I was. Tremendous amounts of power and brilliance were applied to create your life exactly as it is, exactly as it has been, even if you would say, I don't like it, or I didn't like it. It was created that way on purpose, with more power and intelligence and intent than you can possibly imagine. And that's always been the case. Even when you were in your deepest depression, or most angry, or frustrated, or hurt, or whatever it might be, more power and brilliance were applied to create that illusion than you can possibly imagine, exactly the way it was. It was the perfect creation by you, for you, to support you in playing in phase one of the human game. The human game has two phases. We've talked about phase one, where you forget who you really are, you convince yourself the illusion is real, and you're the opposite of who you really are within it, and exploring your oppositeness. Now, by the way, I paint a pretty bleak picture of phase one, but are there fun things that happen in phase one, yes or no? Yes. There are lots of wonderful games to play. It's not all dark and black and horrible. It is for some people in the way they create it. There's lots of fascinating, cool things to do. In my phase one, I was ultimately very unhappy, and I would call, using judgmental language, screwed up and a mess, but I had a lot of fun doing a lot of things within that. It's not just all pure torture. It's an amazing amusement park, even in phase one. But here we're talking about the truth of what's really going on. But the exploring your oppositeness part, for lack of a better term, has fun points. But it's still exploring your oppositeness. That's the truth of what's really going on that we keep from ourselves. Here's phase two, which is what my life is all about and what you're here to leap into or move more deeply into, which is to remember who you really are, which you may have gotten in a certain degree in phase one if you learned something, like you're a spiritual being having a physical experience, or your belief system included that. You had that, but then you didn't have the next piece, which is re-experiencing the truth of it. And expanding into being able to play here, stay in this amusement park, play here, but no limits or restrictions of any kind. Ride any ride, go to any attraction, create ones that have never even existed. By the way, raise your hand if in one way, shape, or form your life involves the internet right now. I don't know how many years ago it was, and I'm going to say 15 years is probably wrong, but 15 years ago, the internet didn't exist. It wasn't even somebody's idea. Look at what we're doing with it. It was an amazing new ride, or an attraction, or whatever you want to do, and introduced into the amusement park that had never existed before, nobody ever thought about. Airplanes, television, radio, cellular phones, fax machines, these are all examples of rides that were introduced into the amusement park, never existed, nobody ever thought of, but it created all kinds of amazing possibilities, and we ain't nowhere near done exploring the possibilities of the internet. That sucker's got how many years to go, who knows? So you can not only play with existing rides that interest you and attractions that we know about that are in the amusement park, but create completely new ones that you've never thought of, no one's ever thought of, no one's ever done before. That's where phase two goes. That's what the journey to the infinite is. The phase two game, which is what this whole event is about. Opening a gateway into that, showing you how to knock out the cloud cover and showing you how to live and play there. That's what this is all about. That's what the journey to the infinite is.